And YouTube AI says, when I ask it for new content ideas, it gives me one idea, and then it gives me basically gave me 3 ideas, which are pretty solid ones. And we're drinking on the job as sober carpenter, non-alcoholic beer. Cheers. And so idea number 2 was untold heavy haul disaster story. And in the explanation, it says your top performing video in the last 90 days is what really happened to Sergei Drachev Heavy Haul, which confirms that your personal journey and in-depth business narratives are extremely popular. Viewers are also watching other channels that focus on the reality of trucking, including dramatic events and breakdowns. The idea: share a detailed retrospective story of the most challenging or expensive disaster you experienced during your heavy haul days. Detail a story where you faced a huge problem on the road and why it works. This combines the success of your personal storytelling with the high stakes reality content your audience is already seeking out across YouTube. Suggested title: The Load They Wouldn't Let Me Pick Up. The most expensive mistake I made in heavy haul trucking. And as soon as I read that, right away I knew what I want to talk about. You guys gonna love this. So I want to talk about something that I didn't want to talk about when I was trucking because I thought, I would get into trouble. But yeah, I did have some hairy, stories with some loads, and one particularly comes to mind. By the way, this is my hat I got for free from Internal Heavy Equipment School, where I started to be a wheel loader operator. And so one particular story is that the first trip with my Jeep and booster. Remember, I had a booster made up by a local plant, and I specifically requested that it can be used as 3+1 or 2+2, right? Because my 60-ton trailer was like highly customizable. It only had 2 axles, and you can add, axle 3, axle 4 in a row, or you can add them as a booster, 3+1 or 2+2, and especially 2+2. I was really wanted to try that because you get more load allowance. Most states, and in Canada as well, I believe, would give you more weight on 2+2 as opposed to 3+1, because of that spread. Not just crazy. I know people in Europe, in Australia, they don't understand this, but here they go by what's called bridge formula. Basically, some crazy scientist once discovered that they were measuring the stress on a bridge, and they discovered that I guess the guy was bored to the limits of his mind, and he decided to measure the stress on the bridge when trucks were passing, and they chose to compare configurations with close position axles versus spaced axles, and they discovered that same weight on a truck created much more stress for the bridge when the axles were close together. And that's why in the States and Canada they like us to separate axles with this gizmos booster, right, where there's like a piece of metal that connects the axles so that they're further apart. They're just the local rules, because they went with this bridge formula, which tells you By the way, I'll do another video about permits and how let's say how many axles you have to use. It's because of this bridge formula. They tell you tell them what's the spacing is between your axles and what your factory rating is, and they tell you how much you can haul on each axle. And it's all different based on the state or province in Canada. And so what happened is that these idiots, let's call them, what they are, they made me the booster. And when I was picking this up at the factory when I lived in Ontario, they had a super difficult time fitting it in because it was not done properly. Like the clearances were too tight, so they had to drill something out. And eventually they hooked it up. I think they did like 3+1. And one guy, I remember the guy in charge of other workers, he said, well, personally, I would not use it as a 2+2. It's 3+1, it's way better. And I'm like, really? I specifically requested that I need, when I was buying this, I said, I need a Jeep with these dimensions because I copied them from a Fontaine website. And actually it was way cheaper than the Fontaine Jeep, but they screwed up that one too. And I said, I need a booster, which I can use with 3+1 or 2+2 axles. Okay. And by the way, I had to pay cash for the booster since it's not a trailer, it's not a truck. It does not have a serial number. And so they told me because it does not have a serial number, it cannot be financed. Whereas the Jeep I was able to finance, the 60-ton trailer I was able to finance. But the booster, the piece of metal that articulates and you can hook up to between the axles, they allowed me to pay in installments, which was great, but it was difficult, but I think I covered it in like 3 installments, because I was making good money and during heavy haul, during like the last years. And so that helped me when I was selling the stuff. I was able to collect a lot of money because especially this booster, it was all paid in cash for. But anyway, so they told me that I wouldn't use it as a 2+2, but I'm guessing it can be used, right, since that's what I requested. And so I found a load from Texas to Alberta. It was a big drill rig, one of those pile drivers, whatever they're called now. I already forgot the technical name. It was sitting there at the, Texas, Houston. No, wait, it was, I think it was, it was Las Vegas, Nevada. They have lots of industrial shows, and this thing was sitting there. And somebody bought it right from the show. And so my job was to ship it from Las Vegas to, I think it was going to like Red Deer, Alberta, just 1 hour north of where I am right now. And that's my disaster story. So listen up. So I go there. I'm super happy that finally I'll be testing out 2+2 because that's what this machine needs. It's super heavy. I ordered the permits beforehand, and of course, I needed Nevada, Utah, I think, right? Well, it's going northwest from Vegas, Montana for sure, because there was a crazy story in Montana. And so I go there, I picked it up, and then drove to T8 truck stop to scale, so that I know that I'm not overweight. And the lady says on the CB radio, no, on the speaker, she says, I have a message that says that the scale is overloaded. I'm like, what? That must be a mistake, right? So I drive around and it's the same result. And of course, with this huge monster machine on, and you 2+2 and the Jeep, and super long. So anyway, we figure out that I was really way overloaded on the tandem closer to the truck while there was pretty much no weight on the rear tandem. So I'm not sure how I drove from the shipper to TA. I think it was like 10-15 miles. So I was way overloaded, on the previous, on the front tandem. So again, I was using 2+2, right? So it turns out the booster could not transfer the weight to the rear tandem. So I called next day because it was already too late. So Ontario was 2 hours back, right? Or 1 hour back. But anyway, so it was too late. So I called the plant next day and I explained the problem. And the guy says, "Oh, yeah, we should have made you some shims." Really? Okay, those shims that you put in. So basically, you have to change the angles where the booster connects to the axles. And so basically, without shims, this booster could not work with the 2+2 setup. And I said, "Can you maybe ship them to me? Like, you're a plant, right? You can make these, my dimensions. You can probably ship these shims to me, like FedEx or UPS, whatever." They went silent after that. And so I just found a local place where they had a forklift. And I begged the guy to help me. I said, "I need to move. I need to change the 2+2 to 3+1. Imagine, with a heavy machine on the trailer. And I'm way overloaded. And this guy was just across the street from the TA truck stop in North Las Vegas. I still remember. This was when? Probably like 10 years ago? No, I started in 17. I think I got my 60 ton in 2019 or 2018, right? Because I had a 55 ton before that. So anyway, I paid $200 US to this guy, and it's super difficult to change to get that booster out because there's lots of pressure, right? Like that weight, that crazy machine weighted, I think it was like 110,000 pounds. And so we tried this and that, and eventually we managed to put 3+1, and without breaking the trailer. Like, that 60-ton trailer was a monster, I'm telling you. Like, it was 7,000 pounds. I still remember it was 7,000 pounds heavier than my previous 55-ton, which I was not happy about at the time. But it was a monster. You can load, I don't know, anything on it. And that's what I was able to sell it for a lot of money. Because as most people realize, that even that 5-ton difference, you would think, right? Like, what's the big deal? 55-ton to 60, but prices on trailers jump up considerably when you go from 55 to 60. And that's when I learned why. Because a 60-ton trailer, it's, you look at the metal, near the axles over there, like everything is, I don't know, it's crazy. Like, Fontaine was great. Fontaine brand is my favorite brand. I would buy it again, like, with zero hesitation. It's a super great trail. Is that 55-ton drop side rail was amazing, light, strong. And the 60-ton, okay, a bit heavy, but it's a monster, right? I moved the cranes, I moved the spiling rig. But anyway, so we managed to switch it to 3+1. At least this way, it was transferring the weight. Because what I discovered is that, without the shims, this booster, could only work in a 3+1 configuration. The problem was that machine was way too heavy for the 3+1. And when I was getting permits, I could see that, I had to basically, play with the numbers. 3+1 would not work if I would have to go through an inspection station. I would get a huge fine. So now I'm in Montana. I think I made it to Montana without getting a ticket. And the big problem is, how do I cross the border? Because on the Saskatchewan side, there's an inspection station, and it's pretty much open 24/7. Of course, we all have this app, and the tracker, I forget what it's called. Basically, the app that shows you all the truck stops and inspection stations, and you can monitor when the inspection stations are open. And I spent hours checking the history to see like maybe there's like a window when they always are closed. No, it's all over the place. Sometimes they close for an hour at 10 a.m. Sometimes they close at 4 p.m. It's unpredictable. So I knew that I could not go through the proper border crossing from US to Canada. And so I found this crossing, and actually did say there was open to trucks, right? And so I'm driving in Montana, and my permit, of course, says go north to Canada. So I take a detour because instead of going through that main crossing where the inspection station is on the Canadian side, I decided to go west and cross the border west of that location, where there was a very small crossing, but it did say open to trucks, and there was no inspection station on the other end. And of course, that's where my risk started, because I was off my route, right? I don't know if you know this, but you're supposed to follow the route on your permit, like exactly. It tells you what road to use, what street to use. So I was supposed to stay on the main highway all the way till I enter Saskatchewan, Canada. And so I remember I took the turn going west, and I'm thinking, here we go. And from that point on, it was risky. It was a kind of like a disaster move, right? Gray area. And I go there, and on the US side, there's a scanner, when they scan for radioactive loads. And I'm so long and so big, I know that I cannot make the turn. Like, it was a pretty sharp turn into that scanner zone. So I go into the outside, outside of that, and the guy, on a bigger radius, and the guy comes out and says, how long did you have your Class 1 license? I said, well, since 2005. Why do you ask? He says, well, because you are in an opposing traffic lane. I said, I'm sorry, I couldn't make that turn in my lane. It was too sharp. So I had to go this way. And I have this huge machine, right? And he looks at me and he says, I don't know. I think I should probably call the sheriff, what are you doing? You're trying to go into opposing traffic lane, but there's nobody on the other side. I said, sir, I would make it over there. I would hit something, And he's like, I should probably call a sheriff. And I'm thinking, man, if he calls the sheriff, and the sheriff, of course, this is an oversized load, and the sheriff would ask me for my permit, I'm in big trouble, I'm not supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be on the main highway going to Canada, on to Saskatchewan. I said, sir, please, I will fix it. Let me just get out of here. I'll be super careful. And he says, well, those scanners, and there's 2 poles on both sides. He says, they're $1 million each. I'm going to be watching you. If you hit one of them, it's your ass. And I'm like, holy moly. I'm driving like this, trying to get out of there. And it took a long time, but I'm telling you, I'm super long, right? I have a Jeep, tandem Jeep. I have 2+2, and I have this crazy machine. And eventually I made it out without killing any of those posts. And now I'm coming to the Canadian side, and Canadian border guards come out, and they're laughing, and they said, what did they tell you? They were going to call the sheriff? I said, yeah. And these guys, it's like a super small crossing, right? So these guys don't get any amusement or entertainment. So they were watching me kind of like a movie, And then I said, okay, basically, of course they make fun of each other, like Americans versus Canadians. And I said, yeah, the guy was, threatening to call the sheriff because I went into the opposite lane. But again, I couldn't have made it through the proper lane. I was, too long. And they said, okay, so that's fine. now, so you're here, but by the way, what the heck are you doing here? We're not a commercial truck crossing. I said, what do you mean? Like, I checked on your website and it says truck crossing. And they said, yeah, it's truck crossing, but only for like small trucks. And again, I have that huge machine on that looks totally out of place, that in the middle of nowhere. It's like desert, right? It's like plains, Saskatchewan. And the guy says, so why didn't you go through the main crossing? And I said, well, because I looked, and that was the truth. I said, I looked on the website where they show you estimated waiting times. And I said, they said there was like a 10-kilometer, 6 miles long line at that crossing. This was like during COVID, right? And the guy looks at me and he says, I know what you're doing. You're trying to avoid going through the inspection station. Let me call my supervisor. And holy mackerel. So first it was the sheriff threat on the American side. Now this guy is threatening to basically he's saying, I'm gonna talk to my supervisor and we're gonna send you back, and you'll have to cross to Canada on that main crossing where of course there's an inspection station, which I cannot do. And I pleaded with the guy. He comes back. Basically they say they don't have that capability to process the digital entry, whatever. But eventually, I guess it's my charm, or I was pleading well enough, so they allowed me to cross. So that he took my the form, the ACE manifest. Well, what is it? PARS. I already forgot all these abbreviations. It was PAPS for US, PARS for Canada. Yeah, it was a form, right? He says, okay. And so basically he had to do an extra step. He had to fax it to the main crossing, and they fax it back with the entry number. And he said, okay, this is the only time we're going to do this. And please tell all your trucker buddies, never cross here. This is not for truck like yours, okay? And I'm like, thank you, sir. Thank you. And he says, by the way, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Red Deer. All right, so here's what you do. Take this highway, then do a left. And I said, okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. I will never try crossing here again. And so I follow his instructions. And of course, I know, and this was like end of the day, right? End of the day. I know that I cannot go during the daylight because all the inspections, there's a bunch of inspection stations between that point and Red Deer. I'm telling you, like to do stuff like that, you have to be very good at research and check out inspection stations, when they open, when they close, and I think even like North Dakota, actually, to go back a little bit, even North Dakota was a bit difficult. I think I had to drive at night over there. But yeah, so now we are in Canada. I went through Montana on the illegal route. I crossed through improper border point where I was not supposed to be. And now, okay, I forgot the time, but anyway, it was too early. So I knew that I have to drive at night. And in Alberta, they have these little, not like a truck stop, but like the major highway. And then all of a sudden there's like a pull out area. Basically, there's like a, wide zone, kind of like a rest area, but it's right on the highway, but to the side. And it's, it's legal. Trucks can stop there. And so what I had to do was just north of that border crossing point. And again, I have this huge machine. You can see it for miles, So, and I know that I'm too heavy on the back, and so okay, that's it. I have to drive at night. Like, forget logbooks, forget regulations, but I just don't want to get caught. I took the machine. It was I don't remember how much it paid, but I think it was a great catch in terms of money, And again, it was not my original idea. It's just that I paid for the booster to work as 2+2, and it didn't work. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, basically, ideally, what I should have done was refuse that load, right? Just when I picked up that machine and I go through the scale in Las Vegas and I see that I'm way overloaded and the 2+2 does not work, so I would, the proper thing to do would be just to call the shipper and say, I'm sorry, my equipment does not function properly. I have to give it back. Basically, lose, I don't know, $15,000-$20,000, right, on truck fare. I mean, the rate they were paying me, I'm pretty sure it was pretty high. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. And so, yeah, so I pull into this area just off the main highway, and I shut down until it was like dark, like 10 or 11 a.m. And then I start driving. Like, of course, you probably know that with an oversized load, you're not allowed. Let me just add some beer over here. You're not allowed to drive at night. You're only allowed to drive, 30 minutes before sunrise and 30 minutes after sunset, right? But I'm stuck with this load. I'm committed. I made a commitment. People are relying on me to deliver that machine. It's a super expensive machine. And yeah, so I waited till it was like 11 or whatever, 10 a.m. because I checked out the distance to the destination. And it's dark night, and I think it was winter. It was winter, and I'm driving like there's nobody around, It's all lights, you're driving in the middle of nowhere. And of course, I knew where the inspection stations were, so I chose some route because, again, I did my research, That's why I did, while I was waiting for the dark, I checked all the locations for the inspection stations on the way to Red Deer. And so I took some back roads. And I remember at one point, I was climbing a hill on some, highway, but it's like a small highway. We're climbing a hill, and it's icy, and at one point I feel the back of my truck starts wiggling, basically the wheels are spinning. And I'm thinking, holy moly, like this machine was like 110,000 pounds, I think. And I'm thinking, what's going to happen if I cannot climb the hill and I stop and then I start sliding back, It was like scary moment. And so I just took my foot off the accelerator just to stop the spinning, and I slowly came to the top of the hill, basically without putting too much torque to the wheels. And I remember I was really scared. Again, there's nobody around, it's all dark, it's the middle of the night, and I'm with this crazy machine, in the middle of Alberta, trying to deliver the load, man. And so I arrive at the consignee. It's some kind of a machine shop I think it was Red Deer. It's like 5 a.m. So I didn't sleep all night. I drove through the night. It's 5 a.m. and I park on the street because the gates are closed. I cannot enter. So I park on the street. And I set my alarm for like 7 or 7:30. I went to sleep for 2 hours. And of course, I don't remember what I did with the logbook, but who cares? And I think at that time it was already electronic logbook, right? So you could not be too, fluent or easy with it. You had to follow the rules. But anyway, 7:30 comes up. I go in, I start the truck, come closer to the gate, go inside, find the guys, and they look at my trailer and they said, I think you're a little bit light in the back there. I said, what do you mean? And he says, well, when we move these machines, we usually have 3+2 axles. They have 5 axles on the back instead of I had 3+1. And so we unloaded the machine, and they used the same machine, I remember, to help me load the booster on the deck. I just disconnected those pins, and they used the same machine I brought as a kind of like a crane. and they lifted the booster with the last axle, put it on my deck, and we disconnected the Jeep, put it on my deck. So, because you need a permit, right? Because unless you have an annual permit in Alberta, you cannot just drive around with being so long, And so, so I went to the nearest truck stop, and I sent all the paperwork, the signed bill of lading to Riviera Finance, my factoring company. And I think I got paid on the same day, right? I got my 95% on the same day. But that was probably the scariest load I had, and one of the very few times, like honestly, I always try to be, by the book, but just this time they didn't give me a choice, like I couldn't refuse that load, since I'm pretty sure, I drove empty. Imagine, from Ontario to Las Vegas. What is it, like 2,000 miles? Because it was very important that I was there on a specific date. When I was talking to the freight broker, the freight broker told me, okay, when can you be there? And I said, well, let me try to find a load towards Las Vegas, and then this is my rate, And they said, okay. But then they came back to me and they said, actually, this is kind of urgent. So it turns out the company that owns that property where the machine was stored would charge them a lot of money if that machine was not picked up on that particular date, let's say 2 days from when we were talking. And so these guys said, okay, we're going to pay you extra if you go there empty, just to be sure that you pick it up on that particular date, So basically they couldn't wait. It was urgent, So people were counting on me. And so I drove empty all the way to Las Vegas from Cambridge, Ontario. And that's why I couldn't leave it. I already spent a bunch of money on fuel, right? And my time, driving time. And then, of course, this, 2 + 2 doesn't work. I paid the forklift guy to switch it to 3 + 1. And so basically I had to bootleg it, as they call it, bootleg. Kind of like gray area trucking. So hopefully I don't get into too much trouble because of telling this story, but that's the true story that sometimes happens in trucking, And another quick one. I think I mentioned this before, but when I had my 55-ton drop side rail, and I bought the 4th axle, because my previous employer, those morons at Premium Ventures, they said, "Oh, you ever thought about getting another axle?" And that 55-ton was modular, like there was connections in the back, so you can add a 4th axle. I said, "Yeah, sure, why not? It's only $10,000, whatever, $10,000 or $15,000." I think I got it slightly used. I think it was like 10 grand US, But I got that 4th axle, and I carried it with me, on top of the 3. And so they're sending me to, I think it was Connecticut. Yeah, it was Connecticut. It was a factory where they make these big machines. And I knew they would be too tall to go through the thruway, like New York Thruway, I-90, because it's like 13.6. And so I decided, after I pick it up, I decided to go through Massachusetts. What I did not know, that in Massachusetts, you pretty much don't see 4-axle trailers and 4-axle trucks, because the maximum gross weight is 130,000 pounds, no matter what. And so I cross into Massachusetts, and they have these truck, what they called, basically it's like a truck Yeah, like a regular pickup truck, but they cruise around and they're looking for trouble. You know, they're DOT guys. And so imagine it's Massachusetts. They know that maximum is 130,000 pounds gross with a permit, and then they see me, 4-axle truck, K-Whopper, and 4-axle trailer, 8 axles. So what the heck am I doing? You know, like that's definitely not something you will see. Why? Because each axle adds more weight, and if the maximum is only 130, it doesn't make sense, you know. And so they pull me over, and the guy brings out into a rest area. I was on a bypass around Boston, I think. Yeah, trying to go west, you know, and north towards Canada. And they pull me over, check my papers, and they say, "How much does this machine weigh?" And I said, "Well, honestly, I'm not sure." I said, I was asking the factory guys, they were not sure either. So, and the guy, of course, Googles it, you know, and he's, "Well, we think it's, you know, we think you're way overweight, you know, for Massachusetts." And he brings out portable scales. And imagine I have 8 axles, so he has to bring out 8 portable scales, put under each axle, and he's directing me. Okay, go forward. Okay, backward. So it took him probably an hour to scale me, but they find that I was, you know, probably like 150,000 pounds instead of 130. And the guy shows up. He's a colleague, so this guy was doing all the heavy lifting. And then another guy, I'm guessing his supervisor, shows up, and he says, "Wait, I know you. You have a YouTube channel?" I said, "Yes, sir. Sergey Drachev Heavy Haul." "Oh, I'm watching you. Cool." So he gives me, he says, "I'll go easy on you." So he gives me, I think it was like $2,000 fine only, because it could have been like 10 or 15 grand, you know. So he gives me $2,000, and he says, "Okay, we're gonna escort you to a staging area, like a local, you know, DOT, basically where all these snow plows, like a municipal property." And there was lots of space in there. So he says, "We're gonna escort you in there, and you take care of the permits, and when you have your permits, you can leave." So he gives me a ticket, and they leave, and I'm sitting there. I cannot go unless I have new permits. And so I start talking to Transport Permits, which is that's the name of the company, Transport Permits, which is my permit broker. And I quickly learn that I'm in trouble, that you need to do a road survey, which costs $10,000 US for a load like that, you know. So basically, yeah, when they're pretty serious in Massachusetts when they say 130,000 is the max. And so I call the broker, and she's almost having a heart attack. Like, what? Why would you go into Massachusetts? You know, you did not know this? And she didn't even know this. I said, "Well, that's how it is. It's 10 grand. Can we do something about this?" And she's like, "Sorry." And she says, "No, it's all on you. Let me know what you can figure out." And I'm like, holy mackerel. So now I'm stuck in this staging area. Well, there's no cops. You know, cops they left me alone. They gave me a ticket. They watch my channel, but I cannot get a new permit. And I'm in Massachusetts. And somehow I start calling local. No, wait, how did I find this guy? Hold on 1 second. I was looking through my t-shirts. I still have it. These guys saved my life pretty much. So I don't know, I don't remember how I found them, but they gave me a free t-shirt, and I said, "Guys, could you please help me? I have this huge load. I cannot get a permit. I'm stuck in Massachusetts, but cops left me alone. But I don't want to get into trouble. I will pay you if you drive my truck to the Connecticut to the Connecticut border. Uh, because I'm thinking, man, if they catch me driving, right, I'm gonna be arrested or something. But this guy, I said, we're gonna drive it. I said, my plan is we're gonna drive at night, bootleg it to the to the Connecticut border. And this was like a young guy. So Ferreira's towing and recovery. They had their own like big trucks, like those monster trucks with a kind of like a crane in the back. But they also had their own trailers. So they were also doing, like deliveries. Yes, it says Chelmsford, Massachusetts. So, and we did like a tour around the company. So it turns out this guy inherited the company. Like the guy I was talking to, he was like in his 30s. He inherited the company from his father, who started it, years ago. And I think they were, Ferreiras. So they were probably, Spanish or Cuban or something like that. And they gave me this cool T-shirt. And the guy says, "I don't care. Sure. What are you willing to pay?" And I don't remember. I think I said, "How about $200, US?" He said, "Well, $250." And so I said, "Okay, I'm at this location. Can we do it like 10 p.m., when it gets dark?" I don't remember what time of year it was, but he's okay. I'm going to come with my girlfriend. She's going to be our lookout. So basically the plan was, so this guy drives my truck, my Kenworth, with this huge machine from the plant in Connecticut. I'm in the back, or actually I'm in the passenger seat, so I can, if cops stop me, I can say, "Hey, I don't know what's going on. This guy just basically driving my truck." And his girlfriend is going to be on the lookout. And basically what they told me is that these truck guys, the truck DOT that pulled me over, they only active like between 7 a.m. and like 6 p.m. You never see them, because he's local, so he knows the things, right? Because they also sometimes probably have to cheat a little bit. And so he says, "Yeah, after dark it's safe." He says, "Don't worry." But I said, "Yeah, you drive my truck, okay? You okay pulling the rig like this?" "Oh yeah, sure, no problem." And so his girlfriend is like 2-3 kilometers ahead, and this guy pulls out, and he's driving really aggressively. It looks like he knows what he's doing. And I'm thinking, man, I hope he's not gonna crash my K-Whopper, And I don't have a Jeep. Back then I just had a 4-axle K-Whopper and 4-axle trailer. So it was easy to drive. So we get out of that staging yard. I look around, there's no cops, And the Connecticut was really like 20 miles away, 30 kilometers. And his girlfriend was on the phone with the guy, like, "Okay, it's all clear," Fuck, I'm telling you, it felt like a movie, And it's like, again, middle of the night, there's pretty much zero traffic, and we are bootlegging the K-Whopper up on this highway towards Connecticut. And then we cross into Connecticut, and right away there's a rest area. And that was my plan. I knew that there would be a rest area there. I researched all the maps, of course. I did my research, and I that's what we agreed on, that he brings the truck to the rest area. And I said, "Okay, we can just park it here, and I'm gonna shut down. We're gonna shut down till the morning, and then I'll start driving, because this in Connecticut, this load was legal, And so he parked the truck. His girlfriend picked him up in the pickup truck, and they went back to wherever they came from. And I slept until morning. And by that time I had my Connecticut permits, and of course I had to avoid I-90 because I was too tall, even though this was a drop side rail trailer. But I made it to Canada and delivered the load and got paid. And just those two stories just show you what you sometimes have to do as a trucker, because you incur lots of expenses. So you cannot just drop the load when your equipment, fails to function properly, and a lot of money is involved. And I'm not sure how much I was paying when I just had the 55 ton and K-Whopper, but I know that when I had my 60 ton, with the Jeep, with the booster, all that good stuff, it cost me $10,000 every month. The truck was $4,000 Canadian. The trailer with the booster and the Jeep was $3,000, and the insurance was $3,000. So it was $10,000 a month Canadian, so roughly $8,000 US. And so I just couldn't, refuse a load like that when they were offering a lot of money. So I had to get creative. And again, this happened a long time ago, and I'm sorry.